You know, there's only one thing I worry about sometimes with regards to Ablakwa's approach.
Right.
And I think he would hear me out a little bit. This is not necessarily adversarial, but I think that from a business standpoint, there are limitations in terms of the nitty-gritties of business transactions that necessarily have to come out. And what I mean by that is that certain deals that are even, let me say, correct, appropriate, and transactions that are done from a business standpoint are not are privileged information, let me put it that way, and as such are not necessarily to be made public. And I can cite the reason why different shareholders, based on their category, have access to certain levels of business dealings. And I can cite the likes of Berkshire Hathaway, where you have Class A, Class B stock holders, and Class B folks have different access, and Class A have different access. So I think that just by way of the right to information bill, it doesn't necessitate that businesses necessarily are supposed or legally required to then now put the game out, because the game is not to be sold. I mean, that is the lingua on the street. It's to be played but not to be sold. And I think that there's that thin line between necessarily trying to know every sentence that was discussed during the board meeting, or every nitty-gritty strategic documentation of a certain entity, and then what is appropriate. So I think that sometimes we need to balance it, because you would agree to the fact that, for instance, and not by any show of doing politics, but this Airbus issue, to some extent, there's always a limitation to what information all of us can be privy to. And by way of that, I can cite that recently Boeing's CEO was questioned, and even questioned about his $21 million salary or so in Congress. But there was a limit to the questioning and a limit to the in totals of the business dealings of Boeing, because of the fact that the question was in a public domain. And I've witnessed many instances where certain things are done behind closed doors for very important reasons of, one, corporate sanctity, two, the need to have in the bosom of the company some very key strategic information that necessarily must not be made public. After all, when you're trying to sell your business, and this business 101, or even a car, they say car sales are lemon. If your carburetor is fault, I doubt if you and I would tell the person we are selling to that, Charlie, everything is fine, but the carburetor is wrong. There's always something, that might be, wrong. I intend to maybe sell a Highlander. My engine is bad. I buy a new engine, put it in the car, air conditioning is not working. If you come and buy it, you go and fix it. So not everything necessarily is made known. Or when I spray it new, I won't tell you that it had an accident at the fender and I've sprayed it. I mean, these are sort of business as usual. So my biggest concern, because I'm unfortunately very pro-business, and I think that we need to respect the rights of businessmen in this country, and I also think that investors' privileges cannot be just taken away, or very sensitive corporate details must not be necessarily disclosed out, because one, we might damage the process of the sale. Two, we might also hurt the corporation itself, and that is my only worry. Sometimes when I look at how this is going. Now the other thing too is that sometimes we also take action not aware of the entire story, and I have been wrong on many things before. I mean, I personally always cite the bus branding issue, which I think even up till today was one of the most ridiculous things in this country in terms of the inquiry, and I think you can also admit that the bus branding literally to a large extent was much to do about nothing, and I would only plead that we don't keep parading and going back and forth about issues that really we should have limitations. If not, then every business, but even in oversight, there are limitations because one, you're not necessarily an investor, unless, of course, I agree that Ghana tax money is all of us our money. But even in that, I've explained carefully that on a normal day in business, Class A stockholders are privy to more details than Class B and Class C, and this is standard world, dealings. So if you are pro private enterprise, and all of us know that private enterprise is what is the backbone of many nations, and still remains the source of employment for a lot of people, and government cannot do it all alone, and always will be better off in terms of efficiency, in terms of funding sources, to let a lot of things be private. So I love what you do, but I think sometimes we need to be mindful of that thin line between what is privileged information for investor sake. I mean, there are conferences that stockholders are invited to, and there are conferences that ordinary people will not be invited to because they don't have a stake in it, and that is where I'm a bit concerned in all of some of your dealings. And mind you that some of our actions also discourage investors looking to come to either acquire or purchase some of government enterprises. And I always say that if not for some of these private banks, my own bank, GCB, would have still had. I remember going to Kissi, and in fact, not to this GCB, but it used to be where you'd see, elderly women doing banking, and these days it's a bit more exciting, to borrow from Rollins's vocabulary, to see, finer, younger women serving you your money. When I was about 12 years and I would go to Kissi Commercial Bank, the experience was not fun at all. Forgive those old women who were very nice to us, but when EcoBank and the others changed and were hiring younger, active girls, I think it dawned on GCB that, hey, though we are, government, we also need to step up our game, and it has transformed, government banking, and I believe that there's always that need for competitiveness, for private enterprise, and I, like the MPP, will forever be very pro private enterprise, and I think that is my biggest concern, largely with some of the approaches you have, with your work.